Hey guys, tonight we are tiptoeing back through the moonlit corridors of medieval Korea, specifically the Goryeo and Joseon dynasties, to uncover some closely guarded beauty secrets. Imagine, if you will, a world lit by flickering oil lamps and the soft glow of paper lanterns, where the rustle of silk is a common sound and the night air carries the scent of pine and perhaps a distant temple's incense. This isn't just about ancient makeup tips. It's about understanding a mindset, a culture where appearance was deeply intertwined with status, virtue, and even spirituality. And let's be honest, if you were suddenly dropped into this era with your 21st century sensibilities and skincare routine, or lack thereof, you probably wouldn't survive the initial shock, let alone the beauty standards. The dedication was intense. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really helps the channel. And hey, why not drop your location and local time in the comments? It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from around the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're drifting now, not in your bed, but through the quiet pathways of a Korean village centuries ago. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. Above you, the moon hangs like a perfectly polished pearl, and it's this image, this ideal of lunar perfection, that we need to hold on to. Because here, in medieval Korea, the ultimate mark of beauty, the absolute pinnacle of desirability for anyone of note, was skin as pale and luminous as that very moon. Forget your sun-kissed glows, your bronzed limbs. Here, a tan was the mark of a field worker, someone who toiled under the sun's harsh gaze. True elegance, true refinement, was broadcast through a complexion that seemed to have never seen a day of hard labor, a canvas of almost translucent white. This wasn't just a fleeting trend, mind you. This obsession with pale skin, often described as jade-like or milky, spanned centuries, from the Goryeo dynasty, which began way back in 918, right through the long Joseon dynasty, which carried Korea almost to the brink of the 20th century. Imagine the quiet dedication. You're a young woman of a good family. Your days are spent indoors, shielded from the sun's rays as if they were tiny, tanning daggers. Your windows might be small, covered with oiled paper that diffuses the light into a soft, forgiving glow. When you do venture outside, perhaps for a carefully chaperoned walk in a private garden, your face is shaded by a wide-brimmed hat, or for women of higher status during the Joseon period, a sugekima, a type of cloak worn over the head that concealed them almost entirely. It's a commitment, isn't it? Makes our modern 30-step skincare routines look like a walk in the park, a very sunny park we'd be desperately trying to avoid if we were them. The pressure was immense. Your skin was your silent ambassador, speaking volumes about your upbringing, your family status, and even your personal virtue. A clear, unblemished, and above all, pale face was seen as an outward reflection of inner purity and refinement. This ties in beautifully, or perhaps rather rigidly, with the prevailing Confucian ideals of the Joseon dynasty especially. Confucianism emphasized order, propriety, and the importance of appearances reflecting inner worth. So, while texts would extol the virtues of naturalness and inner beauty, the societal gaze was undeniably fixed on achieving a very specific external standard. It's a bit like today's no makeup look, but with the added pressure of it signifying your entire family's social standing. No pressure, right? Think about the portraits from these eras, the famous Mindu, or paintings of beauties. The faces are serene, often round or oval, with delicately arched brows, small, rosy lips, and that unmistakable, porcelain-smooth, pale skin. It's an aesthetic of understatement, of subtle perfection. The goal wasn't to look dramatically made up in the way we might think of it now, with bold colors and contouring that could survive a paparazzi flash. Instead, it was about enhancing one's natural features to achieve an idealized version of naturalness, if that makes any sense. A sort of hypernatural, but very specific look. And it wasn't just the ladies. While the pressure was certainly most intense on women, particularly those of marriageable age or in courtly circles, men of the noble Yangban class also valued a well-groomed appearance, which included a clear and reasonably fair complexion. A rugged, weather-beaten look might be fine for a military man in the field, but for a scholar or an official, a more refined appearance was expected. Of course, they weren't necessarily going to the same lengths with skin-whitening concoctions as women were. We'll definitely get to those intriguing, and sometimes alarming, recipes later, but avoiding excessive sun exposure was still a common practice. You'd see scholars with their wide-brimmed gat, those iconic Joseon hats, which weren't just stylish but also pretty effective personal shade providers. The practical fashion statement, if you will. One of the mainstream historical facts that grounds this obsession is the existence and content of texts like the Gyuhap Chongseo. This Encyclopedia of Women's Life, compiled by Lee Bingyeogak in 1809 during the Joseon dynasty, contained extensive advice on everything a woman needed to manage a household, including detailed sections on skincare and cosmetic preparations. The emphasis on achieving and maintaining pale, clear skin runs throughout these texts, providing recipes for face washes, lotions, and powders, all designed to cultivate that coveted luminous complexion. It tells you this wasn't just folklore, it was codified knowledge, deemed important enough to be included in a comprehensive guide for women. Now for a quirky little tidbit. The lengths to which people would go to avoid the sun were quite something. Beyond the special head coverings for women like the Nole or Jangot during the Goryeo and Joseon periods respectively, which offered varying degrees of facial concealment when outdoors, people would meticulously plan their outdoor activities around the sun. Imagine scheduling your errands for the very early morning or late evening, just to dodge those pesky UV rays. It gives a whole new meaning to being a creature of the night, doesn't it? Not for gothic vibes, but for that perfect, pale complexion. It's said that some noble women would even travel in fully enclosed palanquins, not just for comfort or status, but to ensure their skin remained untouched by sunlight. Talk about dedication to the cause, or maybe just a very, very strong aversion to freckles. As you might expect, with such a long-standing and deeply ingrained beauty ideal, there's still plenty for academics to ponder. For instance, historians still argue whether the intense focus on paleness in medieval Korea was primarily a practical indicator of social class, a clear sign you didn't have to perform manual labor outdoors, or if it also carried more profound symbolic meanings, perhaps tied to spiritual purity, auspiciousness, or even pre-Confucian folk beliefs about beauty and the supernatural. While the class aspect is undeniable, the sheer pervasiveness of the ideal across different contexts suggests there might be layers we're still uncovering. Was it purely aspirational for the lower classes, or did they too find ways to connect with this ideal on a symbolic level, even if they couldn't achieve it to the same degree? Imagine the quiet moments of the day. Perhaps you're a young woman in a noble Joseon household. The house is cool and dim. Sunlight filters softly through paper-covered screens. You've just finished your morning ablutions, using a special face wash made from ground mung beans, something we'll explore in much more detail soon. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze mirror. The light is gentle, forgiving. You examine your skin, looking for any hint of sun, any imperfection. The ideal is so clear in your mind. A face like the serene moon, smooth, white, luminous. It's a quiet, personal ritual, but it's also deeply connected to the world outside your walls, to your family's honor, to your future prospects, and to the very definition of beauty in your time. It's a heavy burden for a simple complexion to carry, wouldn't you say? The original, "I woke up like this," probably took hours of not waking up like that, and a lifetime of sun dodging. It kind of makes you appreciate the sheer convenience of a good bottle of SPF 100, even if our current beauty standards sometimes feel just as demanding in their own way. But for now, just picture that calm, pale ideal, the quiet rooms, the soft light. That's our starting point, the canvas upon which all other medieval Korean beauty secrets will be painted. So, you've committed. You're avoiding the sun like it's personally offended your ancestors, all in pursuit of that perfect, pale moon ideal we talked about. But simply hiding indoors isn't quite enough to achieve the luminous, jade-like complexion that was the hallmark of medieval Korean beauty. No, for that, you need to delve into the surprisingly sophisticated world of traditional skincare, a veritable pantry of natural wonders that women, and sometimes men, used with remarkable skill. It's like the original farm-to-face movement, centuries before it became a trendy hashtag. You wouldn't just be passively hoping for good skin, you'd be actively, meticulously cultivating it. Imagine your daily routine. Long before any thoughts of applying decorative color, your focus would be on cleansing, purifying, and nourishing your skin. And the star ingredient, your trusty go-to? Likely ground mung beans. Yes, those humble little green beans. When dried and ground into a fine powder, known as jokuru, mung beans became a gentle yet effective exfoliant and cleanser, used much like soap. You'd mix this powder with a little water to form a soft paste, then gently massage it onto your face and body. Feel the fine, slightly gritty texture as you work it in slow, circular motions. It's not harsh, not stripping, but it diligently works to remove impurities and dead skin cells, leaving your skin feeling incredibly soft and smooth. It's a practice documented extensively, a mainstream historical fact of daily life for many, particularly those who could afford the time and resources for dedicated skincare. The Gyuhap Chongseo, that invaluable encyclopedia we touched upon, is full of praise for mung beans, highlighting their ability to brighten the complexion and treat blemishes. But your skincare journey doesn't end with a simple bean paste. Oh no, that's just the overture. After cleansing, you might turn to rice. Not to eat, well, not just to eat, but for the water you washed it in. That cloudy, starch-rich water, known as saltdumel, was a prized skin toner and softener. You'd carefully collect it after rinsing the rice for a meal, letting any sediment settle, then pat the milky liquid onto your face. It was believed to lighten the skin, reduce the appearance of pores, and give it a delicate, refined texture. Sometimes, rice bran itself, the outer layer of the grain, would be placed in a small silk bag and soaked in warm water, then gently pressed and dabbed onto the skin, releasing its emollient and nutrient-rich properties. Can you imagine the soft, comforting scent, the slightly silky feel of it on your skin? It's a far cry from some of the astringent, alcohol-laden toners many of us grew up with. This was all about gentle nourishment. And then there's honey, nature's liquid gold. Honey wasn't just a sweetener for teas and confections. It was a celebrated skincare ingredient, valued for its moisturizing and antibacterial properties. You might apply a thin layer of raw honey as a face mask, letting its natural humectants draw moisture into your skin, leaving it plump and dewy. Or perhaps you'd mix it with other ingredients, like finely ground nuts or seeds, to create a nourishing, hydrating treatment. Picture yourself relaxing in a quiet room, the faint, sweet scent of honey in the air as it works its magic. It's a sticky business, sure, but the promise of soft, supple skin made it well worth the effort. Our modern beauty industry still raves about Manuka honey, but they were way ahead of the curve in medieval Korea, understanding its potent benefits without needing a lab to tell them. The seasonal bounty of the Korean peninsula also found its way into your skincare rituals. In the summer, cool slices of cucumber might be placed on your face and eyelids to soothe, hydrate, and reduce puffiness, a trick that's so timeless, we still do it today. The juice of the cucumber, with its cooling properties, was also used as a refreshing toner. In the spring, you might gather delicate peach blossoms. These weren't just for admiring. They were often infused in water or alcohol to create fragrant lotions believed to lighten and beautify the complexion. It's said that the scent alone was enough to lift the spirits. Apricot kernels, ground into a powder and mixed with cream or oil, were used to make facial scrubs or masks intended to combat freckles and even out skin tone. Each plant, each fruit, each flower, held a secret, a potential benefit for your skin, passed down through generations. Let's not forget the more, shall we say, dedicated ingredients. Ginseng, that almost mythical root, revered for its health-giving properties when consumed, was also incorporated into skincare. Its revitalizing and anti-aging benefits were highly prized, though its expense likely meant it was reserved for the more affluent. You might find it infused in luxurious creams or oils, promising to restore vitality and a youthful glow. And this wasn't just about rubbing a raw root on your face. Historical records and practices suggest quite sophisticated methods of extraction and preparation to harness these botanical powers. They were creating decoctions, infusions, and carefully blended powders, showing a real understanding of how to work with these natural materials. It makes you wonder if their lab was just a very well-organized kitchen with a lot of patience. Now, for a quirky little tidbit. While many of these ingredients sound lovely and wholesome, the pursuit of beauty could sometimes lead to rather fragrant experiments. It's said that some concoctions, particularly those involving fermented ingredients or certain herbs, might have been incredibly effective but also possessed a rather earthy aroma. Imagine applying a potent face mask that smelled suspiciously like your compost heap, all in the name of achieving that flawless complexion. You'd have to be truly committed, or perhaps ensure your significant other had a really bad cold. It adds a certain unglamorous reality to the otherwise romantic notion of ancient beauty rituals. No pain, no gain, or in this case, no pungent aroma, no perfect skin. The level of detail and the variety of ingredients used really do speak to a deep-seated knowledge of local flora and its properties. This wasn't just haphazardly trying things out. There was an established tradition, a form of folk science, that guided these practices. And this leads to an ongoing discussion among experts. Scholars continue to investigate the extent to which these traditional Korean skincare practices were influenced by or shared common roots with traditional Chinese medicine, given the close cultural exchanges between the two regions for centuries. While Korea undoubtedly developed its own unique approaches and utilized indigenous plants, the foundational philosophies of balance, harmony, and using natural ingredients for health and beauty resonate strongly with broader East Asian traditions. Untangling the precise threads of influence and independent innovation is a complex but fascinating area of study. Think about the patience involved. You're not running to a store to buy a pre-made product. You're gathering ingredients, perhaps from your own garden or a local market. You're grinding, mashing, steeping, and mixing, often by hand. Your mortar and pestle are your best friends. It's a slow, mindful process, a ritual in itself. And this daily or weekly dedication wasn't seen as a chore, but as an essential part of self-care and upholding the aesthetic values of the time. It's almost a form of meditation, connecting you with the natural world and with the lineage of women who performed these same rituals before you. Today, we might call it artisanal skincare, pay a small fortune for it, and marvel at its natural purity. Back then, it was just skincare. Effective, plant-based, and deeply woven into the fabric of daily life, all working towards that serene, blemish-free, and beautifully pale canvas. You can almost feel the coolness of a freshly applied cucumber mask, or the smooth, powdery touch of a mung bean cleanser, a quiet moment of self-care in a world that, while different, still understood the quiet power of looking and feeling your best. Alright, so you've diligently cleansed and nourished your skin with all those wonderful concoctions from nature's pantry we just explored. Your complexion is as close to that pale moon ideal as possible, a smooth, luminous canvas. But the masterpiece isn't complete. Now your attention shifts to a feature that, even in its subtlety, holds immense power: your eyebrows. Oh yes, those little arches of hair above your eyes were a big deal in medieval Korea. Forget just letting them grow wild. Eyebrows were sculpted, shaped, and sometimes even painted with an artistic dedication that could rival a master calligrapher. Welcome to the silent, but fiercely contested, world of eyebrow etiquette. You might think, they're just eyebrows, what's the fuss? But in a society where so much was communicated through nuanced visual cues, your brows spoke volumes. They framed your eyes, the proverbial windows to your soul. They could convey intelligence, serenity, youthfulness, or even a hint of melancholy, depending on their shape and definition. Unkempt, bushy brows? That was simply not done, at least not if you had any social standing or aspiration. It would be like showing up to a royal banquet in your pajamas, a clear sign of neglect, or worse, a lack of refinement. So, achieving the perfect brow was less a casual grooming step and more a crucial part of presenting your best self to the world. The original brows on fleek was probably a whispered compliment in a Goryeo tea house. The ideal shape wasn't static across the centuries, though the underlying principle of neatness and grace remained. During the Goryeo dynasty, which lasted until 1392, the trend often leaned towards delicate, slender brows. Think shapes described poetically, like the willow leaf brow or yuyapmi, a gracefully arching shape, tapering finely at the ends, much like the gentle curve of a willow leaf. Sometimes you'd see brows shaped like a crescent moon, soft and rounded, complementing the era's generally more ornate and perhaps slightly more relaxed aesthetic compared to what followed. The aim was often an air of gentle elegance, even a touch of wistfulness. Then, as Korea transitioned into the Joseon dynasty, with its stronger emphasis on Confucian principles of order and naturalness, eyebrow styles evolved. While still valuing neatness and clarity, the Joseon ideal often favored brows that appeared more natural, yet perfectly defined. They weren't typically pencil-thin, nor were they overly thick or dramatic. Balance and symmetry were paramount. A softly curved arch that followed the natural line of the brow bone was common. The key was to look polished and put together without appearing overly artificial. It's a subtle distinction, isn't it? The kind of effortless beauty that actually requires quite a bit of effort. So, how did you achieve these meticulously crafted brows? It wasn't just a quick tweeze and go. First, there was the shaping. Stray hairs were removed, likely with small, sharp tweezers if you were fortunate enough to own a pair. If not, ingenuity would prevail, perhaps even using clamshells, as some sources suggest for ancient hair removal. For more defined shaping, especially to create those clean lines, a small, sharp blade or razor might have been carefully employed. Imagine the precision required, working so close to your eyes, likely with a polished bronze mirror that offered a somewhat dimmer, perhaps slightly distorted reflection than we're used to. One wrong move and you've got a very surprised-looking eyebrow for the next few weeks. The concentration must have been intense. Once shaped, the brows often needed a little enhancement, especially if they were naturally sparse or fair. This is where the real artistry came in. The most common pigment used for darkening eyebrows was soot. Yes, good old-fashioned soot, but not just any soot scraped from the bottom of a cooking pot. Often, it was specially prepared. Pine soot was particularly favored. You'd burn pine wood or pine resin, carefully collect the fine black powder, and then mix it with a little oil, perhaps sesame oil, castor oil, or camellia oil, to create a smooth, dark pigment. This concoction would then be delicately applied to the brows using a fine brush, a small, shaped piece of wood, or even a dedicated eyebrow pencil-like tool. The goal was to fill in sparse areas, define the arch, and extend the tail of the brow to the desired length and shape, all while maintaining a natural, feathery appearance. It was about suggestion, not a heavy, painted-on look. Plant-based dyes were also part of the eyebrow toolkit. Extracts from various plants could yield shades of brown or black, offering alternatives to soot, or perhaps being mixed with it for a specific consistency or hue. The exact plants varied, often relying on local availability and traditional knowledge passed down through families. Historians note that even early historical records, like murals in Goguryeo tombs dating back to the Three Kingdoms period, long before Goryeo or Joseon, show figures with clearly defined and shaped eyebrows, indicating that this attention to brow aesthetics has very deep roots in Korean culture. These depictions often show strong, arched brows, indicating a long-standing awareness of their impact on facial appearance. The dedication to achieving these perfect arches was, by all accounts, significant. It wasn't a 5-minute job. Think of it as a daily ritual, a moment of focused artistry. 4 women of the court, and especially for Jising, those highly skilled female entertainers renowned for their beauty, artistic talents, and sophisticated allure, eyebrow artistry was elevated to a high form. Jising were often trendsetters, and their mastery of makeup, including eyebrow shaping and drawing, was legendary. Some were said to be able to create a perfect pair of brows with just a few swift, confident strokes. A quirky, though perhaps extreme, tidbit you sometimes hear is that some Jising, or indeed other women striving for that perfect, idealized shape, might have plucked their natural eyebrows almost completely, creating a blank canvas upon which they could paint the desired brow shape each day. Talk about commitment to your look. That's definitely a level of dedication that makes my occasional struggle with an eyebrow pencil feel rather trivial. This meticulous attention to brows does make one wonder about the subtle signals being sent and received. While we might not have a complete dictionary of medieval Korean eyebrow language, the general preference for clear, gently arched, and symmetrically balanced brows seems to align with ideals of composure, intelligence, and grace. Art historians and cultural scholars still debate the precise symbolic meanings behind different eyebrow shapes depicted in Goryeo Buddhist paintings versus Joseon ancestor portraits, and whether these were idealized artistic conventions or reflections of actual grooming practices across the populace. For example, were the slightly more varied and sometimes thinner brows seen in Goryeo art a reflection of a different aesthetic sensibility, or an artistic shorthand for a particular kind of spiritual or idealized beauty? It's these kinds of questions that keep the study of historical beauty practices so intriguing. Imagine yourself now, leaning close to your bronze mirror. The light from the oil lamp flickers softly. You have your little pot of pine soot pigment, your fine brush. With a steady hand, you begin to delicately enhance your brows, following the curve that you so painstakingly shaped earlier. Each stroke is deliberate. You're not just applying makeup, you're cultivating an expression, adhering to a code of beauty that connects you to your culture, your status, and the expectations of your society. It's a quiet, focused moment. And the tiny, almost imperceptible sting from a freshly plucked hair is a small price to pay for the serene, polished look you're aiming for. It's funny, isn't it? Centuries apart, different tools, different ideals, but that quest for the perfect brow, and maybe even the minor discomforts endured to achieve it, feels surprisingly familiar. Some things, it seems, truly are timeless. Your skin is glowing with that hard-won pale luminescence, and your eyebrows are perfectly sculpted, serene arches framing your gaze. You're feeling pretty good, a picture of medieval Korean elegance. But there's still a subtle magic to unfold, a delicate whisper of color that will bring your features to life. We're not talking about bold, dramatic statements here, not for the everyday respectable woman at least. Instead, think of the soft blush of a flower petal, a hint of rosy vitality that suggests health, youth, and a gentle inner warmth. It's time to explore how you'd coax that petal-stained allure onto your lips and cheeks. The primary goal wasn't to look overtly made up. That carefully cultivated pale skin was the star, remember? Any color added was meant to enhance that natural or natural-looking beauty, not to mask it. So, for your lips, you'd be aiming for a soft, rosy hue, something that looked like you'd just bitten into a ripe berry, or perhaps the delicate flush that comes from a brisk walk in cool air, though, of course, you were probably avoiding too much brisk walking in the sun. For your cheeks, it was a similar story. A subtle, healthy glow, as if a gentle bloom of vitality was radiating from within. No contouring, no strobing, just a soft diffusion of color. The undisputed champion in your natural pigment arsenal for achieving these rosy tints was safflower, or ikat as it's known in Korean. These vibrant, thistle-like flowers, with their bright reddish-orange petals, were the primary source of red cosmetic color. The process of extracting the pigment was quite an art in itself, a well-documented historical fact you'd find mentioned in texts like the Gyuhap Chongseo. You couldn't just crush the fresh petals and hope for the best. Oh no, that would be too easy. The petals were typically dried, then subjected to a series of soakings and kneadings to isolate the precious red dye, separating it from the more common yellow pigments also present in the flower. It was a labor-intensive process, often involving repeated rinsing and pressing, sometimes even a controlled fermentation, to yield the purest, most vibrant red. Imagine yourself carefully tending to this process. You have a collection of dried safflower petals, their colors still surprisingly vivid. You steep them in water, watching as the liquid begins to take on a golden hue. That's the yellow you need to discard. You press and knead the petals, again and again, using specific techniques to encourage the release of the red. Sometimes an acidic component, like a bit of vinegar from unripe plums, might be added to help fix and brighten the red color. The resulting pigment could then be dried into a powder or a paste, or infused into oils or waxes. The intensity could be controlled too, a lighter touch for a sheer stain, or more concentrated for a deeper red, though very bold reds were typically reserved for specific occasions or for performers like the jiseen. This safflower pigment, often called yanji, was incredibly versatile. For your lips, you might take a tiny amount of this precious red paste or powder and mix it with a little beeswax or a moisturizing oil, like camellia or apricot kernel oil, to create a soft lip balm with a hint of color. You'd apply it delicately, perhaps with a small brush or even just your fingertip. One popular technique, which sounds surprisingly modern, was to apply the color more intensely to the inner part of the lips, fading it outwards. Yes, the original gradient lip, right there in medieval Korea. It created a soft, youthful pout, as if the color was blooming from within. It's a far cry from a matte liquid lipstick designed to survive a nuclear apocalypse, but it had its own undeniable charm. For your cheeks, the same safflower pigment was your best friend. You'd take the dried powder and apply it with extreme care. The aim was a barely there flush, a whisper of rosiness high on the cheekbones to give your face a healthy, gentle animation. You might use a soft brush, or even a piece of silk or cotton, to dust on the color, blending it carefully so there were no harsh lines. Sometimes, the pigment might be mixed into a face powder for an all-over subtle brightening effect, or combined with a little oil or lotion to create a sheer liquid or cream blush, patted on gently with the fingertips. The key was subtlety. Too much, and you'd risk looking less like a refined lady and more like you'd had an unfortunate encounter with a rouge pot after a few too many cups of rice wine. The oops, too much joy look that probably wasn't the height of sophistication. While safflower was the star, other botanical sources also played their part. The crushed petals of balsam flowers, also known as touch-me-nots, were a common folk method for staining nails and could also lend a rosy hue to lips. Rose petals, with their romantic connotations and beautiful fragrance, might be infused or crushed to create delicate tints. Impatiens flowers were another source. Essentially, if it was a flower with a good, strong color that could be coaxed out, it was probably experimented with. The medieval Korean woman's dressing table, if she were fortunate enough to have one, would have been a collection of these small pots of carefully prepared floral and herbal pigments, each one a testament to her skill and patience. A quirky little tidbit about safflower processing. Achieving that perfect, clear crimson was notoriously tricky. As mentioned, the flower contains both yellow and red pigments. If the extraction wasn't done correctly, or if the batch of flowers wasn't ideal, you could end up with a final product that was more orange or even a muddy brownish red instead of the coveted vibrant hue. Imagine the disappointment after all that work. It's said that experienced women had their own secret tricks and techniques, passed down from mother to daughter, to ensure the best possible color yield. Some might even have believed that the mood of the person preparing the yanji could affect the final shade, a bit of sympathetic magic mixed in with their practical chemistry. The application of these colors was also imbued with a certain degree of care and artistry. You're not just slapping it on. You're considering the shape of your face, the occasion and the overall impression you wish to create. For most women in the Joseon dynasty, governed by Confucian ideals of modesty and naturalness, this meant an extremely light touch. A hint of color on the lips, a faint blush on the cheeks, enough to suggest health and vitality, but not so much as to appear artificial or vain. Jisseeing, on the other hand, operated under different social rules and expectations. Their role as entertainers and artists allowed, and often required, them to use makeup more boldly and expressively. Their lips might be a more defined red, their cheeks more noticeably blushed, as part of their captivating and sophisticated persona. Similarly, for special occasions like weddings, a bride might wear more distinct makeup, including clearer reds on her lips and cheeks, symbolizing joy and festivity. It's fascinating to think about the textures and scents. A lip balm made with beeswax and safflower might have a slightly waxy, floral scent. A cheek powder could be as fine as dust, carrying the faint aroma of dried petals. These weren't mass-produced items with standardized formulas. Each batch was unique, a small piece of handcrafted artistry. And while these natural pigments might not have had the 24-hour staying power of our modern cosmetics, their beauty lay in their organic quality, their connection to the living world. Historians and cosmetic chemists continue to explore the exact formulations and binding agents used in medieval Korean lip and cheek colors to achieve longevity and specific hues, as detailed recipes are often vague on precise measurements or stabilizer ingredients. Recreating these ancient cosmetics is an ongoing area of research, trying to understand just how they achieved such beautiful and lasting effects with purely natural materials. So, you gently press the soft red color onto the center of your lips, blending it out. You dust the faintest hint of rose onto your cheeks. You look into your bronze mirror, and the reflection that gazes back is one of quiet elegance, your pale skin beautifully complemented by these delicate, petal-like touches. It's a look that whispers, rather than shouts, speaking of refinement, health, and an appreciation for the subtle beauty found in nature's own palette. So, you've mastered the art of the subtle petal stain for your lips and cheeks, achieving that perfect, understated glow that speaks of health and refined, natural beauty. This was the ideal for most women navigating the social landscapes of Goryeo and Joseon Korea. But now, let's draw back a silken curtain and step into a slightly different world, one that shimmered with a more visible, more consciously crafted allure, the world of the Jisseeing. These weren't just beautiful women, they were highly skilled artists, entertainers, poets, and conversationalists, and their appearance was an integral part of their profession, a carefully curated aspect of their captivating glamour. Their beauty arsenal was often more extensive, their techniques more refined, and some of their secrets, well, they were closely guarded. Imagine you are now entering a gyeobang, one of the training houses where young girls were rigorously educated in the arts required of a Jisseeing. The air here might be richer with the scent of perfumes, the gleam of polished wood more lustrous, the rustle of silk more pronounced. Jisseeing existed in a unique social sphere. While not part of the aristocracy, they interacted closely with the elite, scholars, officials, even royalty. Their role required them to be not only talented in music, dance, and poetry, but also visually captivating. Thus, while the foundational Korean beauty ideals of pale skin and delicate features still applied, Jisseeing had the license, and indeed the expectation, to enhance their appearance with a more practiced and visible hand. Their makeup wasn't just about quiet refinement, it was a tool of their trade, a part of their artistic expression. Their skincare, for instance, would have been meticulous. That flawless, pale canvas we keep coming back to was paramount. While they used many of the same natural ingredients available to other women, the mung beans, the rice water, the honey, Jisseeing may have had access to more concentrated preparations or devoted even more time to intensive treatments. Their livelihood depended on their appearance, so no effort was spared. They would have also been experts at creating a perfectly smooth base for their makeup, ensuring it looked impeccable for hours under the warm glow of lanterns during evening banquets and performances. And the eyebrows we discussed? For a Jising, eyebrow artistry was absolutely critical. Remember those perfectly drawn willow leaf or crescent moon shapes? A Jising would master these and perhaps even innovate, creating subtle variations that enhanced her individual features or suited a particular mood or performance. The precision of their application, using those fine soot-based pigments, would have been exceptional. Their brows weren't just neat, they were expressive, capable of conveying a wealth of emotion with the slightest arch or tilt. They were, in essence, professional makeup artists specializing in their own faces, and their skill could make them legendary. My modern attempts at symmetrical brows with all the gels and stencils in the world sometimes feel like I'm trying to conduct a symphony with mittens on compared to the artistry they supposedly achieved. When it came to color, Jising could certainly be more adventurous than other women. While the ideal was still elegance rather than garishness, their yanji, that safflower-based rouge, might be applied with a bit more confidence. Lips could be a clearer, more defined red, perhaps shaped with greater precision to create a perfectly alluring pout. Cheeks might carry a more noticeable, though still beautifully blended, flush, adding to their vibrant and engaging presence. They understood how color would play in different lighting conditions, from the soft daylight of a private poetry reading to the flickering lamplight of an evening celebration. They might have even had different looks for different types of engagements or even different seasons, much like a modern performer considers stage makeup. One area where Jising might have subtly pushed boundaries was in enhancing their eyes. While heavy eyeshadow or thick eyeliner, as we know it, wasn't characteristic of traditional Korean makeup in these periods, there were ways to make the eyes appear more expressive and captivating. A very fine line of soot, delicately applied right at the base of the lashes, could make them appear fuller and define the eye without being obvious. Perhaps they used special herbal concoctions, passed down as Jising secrets, to make the whites of their eyes appear brighter, or to give their gaze a particularly sparkling quality. Think less about overt color and more about subtle tricks to enhance clarity, depth, and expressiveness, the kind of techniques that make someone's eyes simply unforgettable. Their guarded glamour also extended to the overall presentation. Hair would be immaculately styled, often adorned with exquisite hairpins and ornaments that were more elaborate than those worn by ordinary women. Their hands would be beautifully kept, their movements graceful. And then there were the perfumes, something we'll explore in more detail later, but Jising were renowned for their sophisticated use of fragrance, creating an aura of enchantment that went far beyond visual appeal. Their knowledge of beauty was holistic, encompassing not just makeup but also deportment, fashion, and the art of conversation. It was a complete package. The secrets of the Jising were less about magic ingredients, though they undoubtedly had their favorite recipes, and more about accumulated knowledge, skill, and artistry. These were passed down from senior Jising to their apprentices within the Gyeobang. This system of training is a well-established historical fact. Young Jising learn not just songs and dances, but also how to dress, how to move, how to speak, and, crucially, how to present themselves in the most alluring and polished manner. Famous Jising like Huang Jini, who lived in the 16th century during the Joseon dynasty and was celebrated for her extraordinary beauty, wit, and artistic talents, would have been a product of this intensive training, her iconic image meticulously crafted and maintained. You can almost hear a senior Jising, a woman of experience and renown, patiently guiding a younger charge. No, child, the arch of the brow must be like the first sliver of the new moon, and the lip color no louder than a whispered invitation. They were essentially running the most exclusive and demanding beauty schools of their time. Now for a quirky tidbit, one can imagine the intense, albeit subtle, rivalries that might have existed between Jising or between different Jising houses. This competition could have spurred innovation in beauty. Perhaps a particular Jising became famous for a unique way of applying her lip color, or for a special herbal blend that gave her skin an unparalleled glow. These little tricks, if proven effective, might be jealously guarded or, if a jising was generous, shared with her closest confidants. Picture them, after a long night of entertaining, sharing tips in the quiet of their communal living quarters, much like performers backstage anywhere in the world. Did you see how Lady So-and-so's skin looked tonight? I heard she uses a special dew collected from peonies at dawn. Okay, maybe not that specific, but you get the idea. Their secrets were their professional edge. Of course, this also leads to complex questions. Scholars continue to debate the degree to which jising were autonomous agents in shaping their own beauty standards versus being subject to the codified expectations of their patrons and the societal structures that governed their profession. While they were undeniably skilled artists who cultivated their own unique styles, they also operated within a system where their appeal to often powerful male patrons was essential. How much freedom did they truly have to experiment or defy convention, versus how much was their look dictated by the tastes of those they entertained? It's a nuanced discussion, recognizing both their agency and the constraints they faced. Imagine the scene, a banquet hall, softly lit by paper lanterns. The air is filled with the sounds of music, laughter, and learned conversation. You see a jising, her silk robes shimmering, her face a mask of serene, artful beauty. Her skin is flawless, her brows perfect arches, her lips a soft, inviting red. She moves with grace, her voice melodious. Everything about her presentation is deliberate, polished, the result of years of training and daily dedication. It's a far cry from the simpler routines of other women, a testament to the specialized role jising played in Korean society. Their glamour wasn't just vanity, it was a vital component of their art and their livelihood, a carefully constructed and closely guarded form of beauty that continues to fascinate us centuries later. It makes you wonder what beauty tips they give us today, probably something involving a lot more patience than we currently possess. We've admired the sophisticated glamour of the jising, their skillfully applied makeup, and their mastery of allure. We've also seen how everyday women sought a more subtle, natural radiance. But underlying all of this, remember that intense, relentless pressure for pale, flawless skin? That pale moon ideal we keep returning to wasn't just a preference. It was a societal imperative, a benchmark of beauty, status, and even virtue. And when an ideal is that powerful, that deeply ingrained, it can unfortunately lead people down some rather shadowy paths, towards hidden ingredients and dangerous practices, all in the desperate pursuit of that coveted whiteness. So, let's gently pull back the veil on some of the forbidden whitening woes of medieval Korea. You can imagine the scene. You've tried the mung bean washes, the rice water rinses, you religiously avoid the sun. But perhaps your complexion isn't quite reaching that shade of translucent jade you see in paintings or on the faces of the highest-ranking court ladies. Or maybe you have blemishes or freckles that you're desperate to erase. What do you do when the gentle methods aren't enough, or aren't working fast enough? This is where the temptation to use stronger, and often secret, substances would creep in. These weren't the kind of recipes you'd find openly discussed in the Gyuhap Chongseo. Not usually. These were the hush-hush solutions, the under-the-counter type of ingredients that promised dramatic results, but often came with a terrible hidden cost. One of the prime culprits in the historical quest for whiter skin, across many cultures and not just Korea, was lead. Specifically, white lead powder, often known as lead carbonate or ceruse. When applied to the skin, lead provides a dense, opaque white coverage. It could effectively mask imperfections and create a strikingly pale, almost porcelain-like finish. Sounds great, right? The problem, of course, is that lead is highly toxic. While people in medieval times wouldn't have understood the full extent of lead poisoning as we do today, the neurological damage, the organ failure, the developmental issues in children, they likely observed some of its detrimental effects on the skin over time. But the immediate visual payoff, that smooth, white veneer, could be incredibly seductive. Imagine someone carefully, secretly, dabbing this fine white powder onto their face. It feels cool, perhaps a little heavy. It creates an almost unnervingly perfect, matte surface. In a world lit by the soft glow of oil lamps and candles, this unnatural whiteness might have looked particularly striking, even ethereal. But beneath that flawless facade, the lead would be slowly seeping into the skin, beginning its insidious work. Continued use could lead to skin damage, dryness, cracking, a grayish or yellowish tinge as the skin reacted, ironically undermining the very beauty it was meant to enhance. And that's just the visible part. The systemic effects, though perhaps not directly attributed to the makeup at the time, would have been far more severe. Talk about a killer look, quite literally in some cases. Another dangerous contender in the skin whitening game was mercury. Various mercury compounds, such as mercuric chloride, were known for their ability to lighten skin and fade freckles. Mercury acts by inhibiting melanin production, so it could indeed reduce pigmentation. It was also sometimes used to treat skin infections due to its antimicrobial properties. However, like lead, mercury is a potent neurotoxin and can cause a horrifying array of health problems, including kidney damage, tremors, personality changes, and eventually, death. Applying mercury-based creams or powders, even in small amounts, day after day, was akin to playing Russian roulette with your health. Back then, reading the ingredients list wasn't really an option, was it? It was more a case of, this seems to work for now, let's hope for the best and try not to develop any mysterious tremors. While direct, explicit mentions of lead carbonate face powder or mercury skin cream in everyday medieval Korean beauty recipes are not as common as references to plant-based ingredients. The intense desire for whiteness, coupled with trade and cultural exchange with regions like China, where such substances were sometimes used, makes it highly probable that these toxic whiteners found their way into some Korean beauty arsenals, especially for those seeking more extreme results. Medical texts from the broader East Asian region from these periods do describe symptoms that are consistent with heavy metal poisoning, and sometimes even link them to certain topical applications. It's a historical fact that these substances were known and used for various purposes, including cosmetics, in other parts of the world with similar beauty ideals, such as Elizabethan England with its lead-based ceruse, or Edo period Japan with its own white face powders that could contain lead or mercury. Beyond the infamous heavy metals, other less dramatically toxic but still harsh ingredients might have been employed. Strong astringents from certain plants, or even mild acids, could have been used in an attempt to bleach the skin or peel away imperfections. While natural, these could still cause significant irritation, photosensitivity, and long-term damage if overused or improperly prepared. The line between an effective herbal remedy and a harmful irritant could be very fine indeed, especially without modern dermatological knowledge. The woes part of this story is truly heartbreaking. Imagine the desperation. You're a young woman, and your marriage prospects, your social standing, your entire future, seem to hinge on achieving this specific look. The pressure is immense. So you take the risk. At first, the results might seem miraculous. Your skin is whiter, smoother. But then the problems begin. Your skin becomes irritated, discolored. You try to cover the damage with more of the toxic product, creating a vicious cycle. Your health starts to decline in subtle, then not so subtle ways. And all because of an unattainable ideal of beauty. It's a sobering reminder that the pursuit of beauty, when taken to extremes, can have devastating consequences. For a quirky, or rather grim, tidbit, it's said that long-term users of lead-based makeup would sometimes develop a condition where their skin became so damaged and discolored that they needed to apply even thicker layers of the white makeup to hide the underlying ruin. This could create a truly mask-like, unnatural appearance, where the face almost looked like it was cracking. There might have even been euphemisms or folk terms for people suffering from the visible effects of these harsh cosmetics, perhaps whispered warnings or cautionary tales about so-and-so who chased the white rabbit too far and paid a terrible price. This brings us to an area of ongoing scholarly inquiry. Toxicologists and historians who study ancient cosmetics debate the exact formulations and prevalence of heavy metal-based skin whiteners in medieval Korea. Direct, explicitly incriminating recipes in common household guides are rare, as one might expect for something known to be harmful or at least of questionable benefit. Therefore, evidence is often inferred from broader East Asian cosmetic and medical practices, analysis of archaeological remains, though cosmetic residues are notoriously difficult to identify definitively, and descriptions of symptoms in historical medical texts that align with heavy metal poisoning. It's a complex puzzle, trying to piece together these hidden, dangerous practices. It makes you appreciate the relative safety of modern cosmetics, despite our own contemporary anxieties about parabens and sulfates. At least we, mostly, aren't knowingly slathering our faces with lead and mercury. It's a stark reminder that the desire to conform to beauty standards can be incredibly powerful, sometimes powerful enough to override common sense or even the body's own warning signs. Some people will do anything for beauty, including inadvertently shortening their lifespan. We just stick to questionable internet trends and filters now, which is arguably a step up, health-wise. But the underlying human desire to be seen as beautiful, to fit in, that's a story as old as time itself, sometimes with a very dark and very white undercoat. We've tiptoed through the shadowy alleyways of forbidden whitening woes, witnessing the desperate measures some might have taken to achieve that all-important pale complexion. Now, let's sweep aside those unsettling thoughts and ascend to the pinnacle of medieval Korean society, into the rarefied air of the royal palace. Here, within the grand halls and private chambers, beauty standards weren't just aspirational, they were an intrinsic part of royal dignity, image, and power. If you thought the Jisung had a sophisticated routine, just imagine the exclusive and elaborate beauty rituals unfolding within the palace powder rooms. You are now a silent observer in the inner sanctum of a Joseon queen or a high-ranking court lady. The term powder room itself might be anachronistic, but picture the private chambers, serene and opulent, where these rituals took place. The air is subtly scented, perhaps with rare floral incense or the natural fragrance of meticulously prepared cosmetics. Light filters softly through paper-screened windows, illuminating chests inlaid with mother-of-pearl, gleaming bronze mirrors, and delicate celadone pottery containers holding precious creams and powders. Here, there was no skimping. Only the finest, purest ingredients would do. The rice for skin-softening water would be the most polished grains, the honey of the highest grade, the ginseng specially selected for its potency. Their skincare routine probably had more steps than a royal procession itself. The stakes within the palace walls were incredibly high. A royal woman's appearance was constantly under scrutiny, not just for its aesthetic appeal, but for what it signified. Flawless skin, serene composure, and an air of refined elegance were seen as reflections of the court's virtue and stability. For a queen or a royal concubine, beauty could be a source of influence, a tool in the complex web of court politics. Therefore, their beauty regimens were not casual affairs but carefully orchestrated rituals, often involving dedicated attendants. These gangmyo, or court ladies, were highly trained women with specialized roles. Some would have been experts in hairdressing, others in the preparation and application of cosmetics, and still others in overall skincare and well-being. Imagine having a personal attendant whose sole job was to ensure your complexion was always perfect. Royal face polisher might not have been an official title, but the dedication was certainly there. The exclusivity extended to the ingredients themselves. While commoners and even nobility used local botanicals, the palace would have had first access to the rarest and most expensive items. This could include specially cultivated herbs, exotic floral essences imported as tribute from distant lands, or even ingredients like powdered pearl, rumored to bestow an unparalleled luminosity upon the skin. Perhaps specific royal springs were designated, their waters believed to have unique beautifying properties, reserved solely for the use of the royal family. If my bathroom cabinet looked like their collection of precious ingredients, I'd probably need a second mortgage and a team of curators just to manage it. The beauty rituals themselves would have been far more elaborate and formalized than anything practiced outside the palace walls. Your day might begin with a luxurious bath, the water infused with aromatic herbs like mugwort or iris, chosen for their purifying and skin-softening properties. Flower petals might float on the surface, releasing their delicate perfume. This wasn't just about hygiene, it was a sensory experience, a way to calm the mind and prepare the body. Following the bath, a multi-step skincare routine would commence. Each product, cleanser, toner, moisturizer, perhaps a special serum or essence, would be applied with meticulous care, often involving gentle massage techniques to enhance absorption and stimulate circulation. While jade rollers as we know them today are more associated with Chinese practices, jade itself was highly prized in Korea, and it's plausible that smooth pieces of jade or other precious stones were used for facial massage to cool the skin and reduce puffiness. Makeup application for a royal woman was an art form defined by exquisite subtlety. The goal was an almost supernatural perfection that appeared effortlessly natural, embodying Confucian ideals of inner virtue reflected in outer grace. The pale, luminous skin was, of course, paramount. Any pigments for lips and cheeks, that familiar safflower yanji, would be of the finest quality, applied with the lightest touch to give just a hint of youthful color, a delicate bloom that looked entirely innate. Eyebrows would be perfectly shaped and defined, but never harsh. The overall effect was one of serene, almost ethereal beauty, a testament to both the quality of the products and the skill of the attendants. It wasn't just the face that received such devoted attention. Hands would be kept soft and smooth with special creams. Hair was an incredibly important element of a royal woman's appearance, washed with herbal preparations, scented with oils, and then elaborately styled into intricate updos, secured with ornate binyeo, hairpins, and other adornments often made of precious metals, jade, coral, or amber. The materials and designs of these hair accessories were strictly regulated according to rank, a visible marker of one's place in the palace hierarchy. This is a well-documented historical fact. The strict sumptuary laws and codes governing dress and adornment within the Joseon court extended to every detail of appearance. For a quirky tidbit, imagine the specific rules that might have governed cosmetic choices based on rank or occasion. Perhaps only the queen was permitted to use a certain rare perfume or a particular shade of red for ceremonial occasions. Maybe junior court ladies had restrictions on the elaborateness of their hairpins or the visibility of their makeup. These weren't just about aesthetics, they were about maintaining order and reinforcing the rigid social structure within the palace. One can only imagine the silent competition or the careful adherence to protocol, lest one commit a cosmetic faux pas that could have real social consequences. Maybe a court lady once wore a hairpin slightly too ornate for her station and caused a minor scandal, the sort of thing that would be whispered about for weeks. The influence of neighboring imperial China on Korean courtly practices is an area that historians continue to explore. Given the close tributary relations at various points in history, it's natural to ask, historians debate the extent to which the beauty routines within the Korean royal court were unique to Korea versus being heavily influenced by or mirroring the courtly practices of imperial China. While Korea undoubtedly maintained its own distinctive aesthetic sensibilities and utilized indigenous ingredients, the flow of ideas, luxury goods, and diplomatic exchanges likely meant that some trends and practices were shared or adapted across the region, especially at the highest levels of society. So, picture yourself in that quiet, opulent chamber. The scent of sandalwood and orchids hangs in the air. Your attendants move with practiced grace, their hands cool and skillful as they apply a soothing lotion or delicately trace the line of your eyebrow. The world outside, with its noise and cares, feels very distant. Here, in this cocoon of privilege and ritual, your beauty is cultivated like a rare flower, a symbol of status, refinement, and the enduring power of the royal court. It's a far cry from a quick swipe of lip balm in the car, isn't it? This was beauty as a state affair, a serious and time-honored business. We've just had a peek into the opulent and exclusive world of palace powder rooms, where beauty was a state affair, cultivated with the finest ingredients and dedicated attendants. It's a far cry from the daily life of an ordinary person in medieval Korea, isn't it? But don't for a moment think that common folk neglected their appearance or lacked their own beauty wisdom. Oh no. While they didn't have access to powdered pearls or imported floral essences, they possessed something equally valuable: ingenuity, resourcefulness, and an intimate knowledge of the natural world around them. Let's explore the clever charms and readily available household items that formed the beauty arsenal of everyday people. You're no longer in a silken chamber, but perhaps in a simple, thatch-roofed house, or working in a sun-drenched field. The concerns are different here. Survival, sustenance, and hard work are paramount. Yet, the desire to look presentable, to maintain healthy skin, and yes, even to possess a certain degree of that admired pale complexion, still flickered. It was just pursued with a different set of tools and expectations. Forget elaborate multi-step routines. Think practical, often multi-purpose, solutions sourced directly from the kitchen, the garden, or the surrounding countryside. Their multitasking often involved using the leftover rice water from preparing dinner as a soothing face wash a bit later. We just scroll on our phones while our fancy sheet mask slowly congeals. Rice water, that humble yet effective byproduct of washing rice, was a true staple, accessible to nearly everyone. Remember how we discussed its use for softening and brightening the skin? Well, for commoners, this was likely the cornerstone of their skincare. You wouldn't dream of just discarding that precious cloudy liquid. After rinsing the rice for the evening meal, you'd carefully set the water aside. Later, you might use it to wash your face, feeling its milky coolness, knowing it was gently cleansing and nourishing your skin after a long day. It was simple, free, and remarkably effective, a tradition that has endured for centuries for good reason. Mung beans, too, while perhaps a bit more of a valued food item, could still find their way into skincare if a family could afford to set some aside or if they grew them. Ground mung beans, or perhaps other more readily available ground grains or beans like adzuki beans, could serve as a gentle exfoliating cleanser. The slightly gritty texture would help remove dirt and dead skin cells, leaving the skin feeling smoother. It wasn't about luxurious pampering. It was about practical cleanliness and making the most of what you had. The real pharmacy for common folk was the natural world just outside their door. Wild herbs, flowers, and plants, gathered according to seasonal availability and passed down folk wisdom, played a huge role. You might find someone using the juice from crushed cucumber or other gourds, plentiful in summer gardens, as a cooling, hydrating mask or toner, much like their wealthier counterparts, but sourced directly from their own patch. Dandelion leaves, often seen as a humble weed, might be crushed and applied to soothe skin irritations. Mugwort, a plant with a long history of use in Korean folk medicine and cuisine, could be steeped to create a cleansing and purifying wash, or even hung in bundles to create a fragrant, insect-repelling steam. Persimmon leaves, too, were valued. Some believed that washing with water in which these leaves had been soaked could improve the complexion. The knowledge of which plant to use for what purpose was a vital part of household management, passed from mother to daughter, a living encyclopedia of natural remedies. Clay, dug from riverbeds or specific earth deposits, could be used to create purifying facial masks. Imagine smoothing cool, damp clay onto your face, feeling it tighten as it dries, drawing out impurities from your pores. It's a practice as old as humanity itself, and one that offered an effective deep cleanse without costing a single coin. Wood ash, carefully prepared from specific types of burned wood and mixed with water, could also serve as a basic cleanser due to its alkaline properties, a precursor to lye-based soap making. It wouldn't have been the most fragrant experience, perhaps, but it got the job done. Forget expensive serums and artisanal soaps. Their secret weapon for clear skin might literally have been something that didn't get eaten by the chickens this morning, or something dug up from the backyard. When it came to adding a touch of color, options for commoners were naturally more limited and likely reserved for very special occasions, like a village festival or a wedding. There were no pots of meticulously prepared yanji from safflower petals here, as safflower was a valuable cash crop often used for dyeing textiles or for trade. Instead, you might rely on the direct stain from crushed berries, perhaps a wild raspberry or mulberry, to give a fleeting, rosy tint to your lips or cheeks. Or you might find a particularly vibrant flower petal and rub it directly onto your skin for a hint of color. For eyebrow definition, soot was still the go-to, but it was more likely to be soot carefully scraped from the inside of a cooking pot lid rather than specially prepared pine soot. It was about making do creatively and resourcefully. Sun protection, so crucial for that pale skin ideal, also took a practical turn. While noblewomen might have their concealing cloaks and shaded palanquins, a farming woman would rely on a wide-brimmed straw hat, woven by hand, to shield her face and neck from the harsh sun as she worked in the fields. Long sleeves and leggings were worn not just for modesty but also for protection from the sun, insects, and scratches. These weren't fashion statements, they were necessities. Yet, they inadvertently helped in preserving a somewhat lighter complexion than would otherwise be possible with hours spent outdoors. It's a well-established historical fact that folk traditions across the globe are rich with examples of common plants being used for hygiene, healing, and minor beautification. The Korean peninsula, with its diverse flora, was no exception. The principle of Shinto Byuli, meaning body and soil are not two, reflects a deep understanding that what the local land provides is best suited for the people living there. This philosophy would have underpinned many of these folk beauty practices. For a quirky tidbit, imagine a local belief tied to a common plant. Perhaps it was said that if you washed your face on the morning of Dano, a traditional spring festival, with water that had collected dew from iris leaves, you'd have a clear complexion for the entire year. Or maybe there was a playful tradition among young village women of daring each other to stain their lips with the brightest, most ridiculously colored berry they could find, leading to much laughter and temporarily clownish smiles. These little rituals and bits of folklore added color and charm to their daily lives. Naturally, the everyday beauty practices of commoners differed significantly from the elaborate rituals of the elite, and this leads to an interesting area of discussion for academics. Anthropologists and social historians discuss the degree to which commoners actively aspired to the elite beauty standards, that pale, porcelain ideal, versus maintaining distinct, local aesthetic values that perhaps prioritized visible health, strength, and practicality. How much did the farmer's wife truly dream of looking like the queen, and how much did she value a complexion that spoke of her hard work and connection to the land? There was likely a spectrum, with some aspiration towards elite ideals, but also a strong grounding in the realities and values of their own communities. If you told a hardworking farming woman in Joseon, Korea about a modern 10-step skincare routine involving multiple serums, essences, and ampoules, she'd probably just stare at you blankly for a moment, then perhaps offer you a spare hoe and point you towards the nearest overgrown patch of field that needed weeding. That was a 10-step program she understood, one that built strength and character, even if it didn't always result in perfectly pale skin. Yet, in her own way, with her rice water, her foraged herbs, and her clever use of everyday items, she was still participating in that age-old human desire to care for oneself, to feel clean and presentable, and to find a little bit of beauty in the everyday. Her charms were indeed clever, born of necessity and a deep, intuitive understanding of the world around her. We've seen how common folk in medieval Korea cleverly used nature's bounty for their beauty needs, a stark contrast to the lavish resources of the royal court. Now, let's shift our gaze upwards, quite literally, to an aspect of personal presentation that was laden with meaning, a silent language understood by all: hair. In a society deeply influenced by Confucian values, your hair was considered a sacred inheritance from your parents, something to be cherished and cared for, certainly not cut carelessly. Beyond this fundamental respect, the way you wore your hair, and especially how it was adorned, sent a cascade of veiled messages about your age, marital status, and, most significantly, your social standing. Imagine you're walking through a bustling marketplace or observing a quiet village scene. Without a word being spoken, you could glean a remarkable amount of information about the people around you simply by looking at their hairstyles. For unmarried individuals, both young men and women, the style was generally quite simple. You'd see girls and young women wearing their long, dark hair in a neat braid down their backs, a style known as diengi miori. This braid was often tied at the end with a colorful ribbon, a diengi, usually red for unmarried girls, which added a touch of youthful charm. Young, unmarried men would also often wear their hair long, sometimes braided or simply tied back. The real transformation, and the point at which hair began to speak more loudly of status, occurred with marriage. For a woman, marriage meant her hair was now put up. This wasn't just a practical change, it was a significant rite of passage. The most common style for married women was the jakjin miori, a neat, compact bun worn at the nape of the neck. To create this, the hair was carefully combed, often with fragrant camellia oil to give it sheen and manageability, then twisted and secured with a long hairpin called a binnyo. The very act of putting her hair up signified her new status as a married woman. For men, marriage or a coming-of-age ceremony meant their long hair was styled into a sangtu, a tight topknot, which was then often covered by a gat, the iconic Joseon-era hat. The sangtu was held in place by a headband called a manjin and secured with a pin, the dongot. Now, this is where the veiled messages become truly fascinating, especially for women. While the basic jakjin miori was common, the way it was adorned, particularly with the binnyo, was a direct reflection of her husband's or family's wealth and social position. A binnyo could be made from humble materials like wood or bone for a woman of modest means. But as you ascended the social ladder, these hairpins became increasingly elaborate and expensive. They could be crafted from silver, gold, jade, coral, amber, or tortoiseshell, often intricately carved or adorned with precious stones and dangling ornaments. The length and thickness of the binnyo also mattered. A wealthy noblewoman might wear a long, substantial binnyo of pure gold or jade, a clear and unmistakable symbol of her status. You thought choosing the right designer handbag was complicated? Imagine trying to pick the perfect status-affirming hairpin that also didn't threaten to give you a tension headache by noon, or worse, accidentally poke someone's eye out in a crowded room. Another important hair accessory for women of high rank, including royalty and noblewomen, was the chiapji. This was an ornamental hairpin, often shaped like a phoenix for queens or a frog for princesses and other high-ranking ladies, worn on top of the head at the parting of the hair when wearing ceremonial attire. The material and design of the chiapji were strictly regulated by rank. Even the diengi, the ribbons used to tie and decorate hair, varied in quality. Commoners might use simple cotton ribbons, while noblewomen would have diengi made of fine silk, beautifully embroidered with auspicious symbols or family crests. But perhaps the most dramatic and telling hair statement, particularly during certain periods of the Goryeo and Joseon dynasties, was the gash. These were elaborate wigs or hair extensions made from human hair, used to create incredibly voluminous and often very heavy hairstyles. The ability to afford a large and ornate gash was a significant display of wealth and status. Some of these constructions were truly architectural, piled high and wide, adorned with numerous expensive hairpins, ribbons, and other ornaments. Talk about a hair-raising display of status. These weren't just hairstyles, they were wearable declarations of prestige. The historical fact is that the gash became such a symbol of extravagance and such a financial burden on families trying to keep up with the fashion that sumptuary laws were eventually enacted, particularly during the later Joseon dynasty under pragmatic rulers like King Yangjo, to try and curb their excessive size and cost. These laws aimed to promote frugality and reduce social competition based on such outward displays. The very existence of these laws tells you just how seriously hair adornments were taken as indicators of social hierarchy and how fashion could sometimes spiral into what was seen as detrimental excess. Of course, wearing these massive gash wasn't always a comfortable experience. This brings us to a rather quirky and somewhat alarming tidbit. There are historical accounts and anecdotes suggesting that these enormous wigs were not only incredibly heavy, sometimes weighing several kilograms, but could also be dangerous. Women reportedly suffered from neck pain and stiffness. There were even stories of women fainting or, in extreme and possibly exaggerated tales, even dying from the sheer weight and strain, or from accidents caused by the unwieldy hairstyles. Imagine trying to navigate a crowded space or bow deeply with a small mountain of hair teetering on your head. It gives a whole new meaning to beauty is pain. The exact social dynamics and motivations behind the gash trend are still subjects of discussion. Historians and fashion scholars continue to analyze the precise evolution of gash styles and the socio-economic factors that drove their extreme proliferation and eventual decline, debating whether it was purely fashion-driven by a desire for aesthetic grandeur, a form of conspicuous consumption, or if it had deeper symbolic roots related to female social competition, family prestige, or even attempts to emulate the elaborate hairstyles seen in Chinese court paintings. Even for men, while perhaps less overtly flamboyant, hair accessories subtly communicated status. The manjin, headband, and dongat, top-knot pin, could be made from finer materials like horsehair of a particular quality or even precious metals for the affluent. The gat itself, the wide-brimmed hat worn over the top knot, also had variations in material, like fine horsehair or silk, and craftsmanship that could indicate the wearer's social standing. So, as you're observing the people around you in this medieval Korean setting, pay close attention to their hair. That long, flowing braid with a simple red diengi tells you a young woman is unmarried. The neat bun secured with a modest wooden binyeo speaks of a married woman of humble means. But then you see her, a noble woman, her hair piled high in an impressive, though perhaps slightly less enormous, if it's after the sumptuary laws, gash or a beautifully coiled arrangement, gleaming with multiple ornate binyeo of jade and silver, and perhaps a cheopji peeking from the crown of her head. Her hair isn't just styled, it's a proclamation. A bad hair day for someone of this station wasn't just an inconvenience, it could almost be a social misstep. Oh dear, Lady Park's binyeo seems a bit simple today, are the family fortunes waning? Such were the silent, yet potent, messages conveyed by the artful arrangement and adornment of hair. We've just untangled the intricate messages woven into medieval Korean hairstyles, seeing how every pin and braid could speak volumes about a person's place in the world. Now, let's drift from the purely visual and allow another sense to guide us, the subtle, evocative power of scent. In medieval Korea, fragrance wasn't about dousing yourself in an overpowering cloud of perfume as you might imagine from some modern sensibilities. Instead, it was an art of delicate suggestion, a hidden charm associated with cleanliness, refinement, personal allure, and even spiritual purity. It was about creating fragrant fogs, both personal and environmental, that whispered rather than shouted. Imagine yourself in a noble woman's chamber, or perhaps a serene Buddhist temple. What do you smell? It's unlikely to be a single, strong perfume. Instead, you might detect a complex tapestry of aromas, the clean, slightly medicinal scent of burning incense, the faint, spicy sweet fragrance emanating from a small silk pouch tucked into someone's robes, or the delicate perfume of freshly laundered silk that had been stored with aromatic herbs. This was a world where scent was an integral part of the atmosphere, both personal and shared. The most common way you'd carry a personal fragrance was through a hayangnang, a small, often beautifully embroidered, scented sachet or pouch. These weren't dabbed on the skin but worn on the person, perhaps hung from the jiagari, upper garment, ties, tucked into a sleeve, or carried in a pocket. As you moved, the hayangnang would release a gentle waft of its contents, a subtle aura of fragrance that would only be noticeable to someone in close proximity. Forget a signature scent you spray on. They had signature sachets, which probably carried much less risk of accidentally spritzing it directly into your eye during a rushed morning. What went into these precious little pouches? A delightful array of aromatic treasures. Dried flowers like chrysanthemum, plum blossom, or orchid petals would lend their soft floral notes. Spices were crucial. Cloves, known as zhonghyang, were immensely popular for their warm, sweet, and enduring scent. Aromatic woods were also highly prized. Sandalwood, or danhyang, with its creamy, woody fragrance, was a favorite. Even more precious and sought after was agarwood, also known as aloes wood or chimyang. This rare resinous heartwood, produced when certain trees become infected with a type of mold, has an incredibly complex, rich, and psychoactive aroma, and was worth its weight in gold, if not more. Then there were ingredients like camphor, yongno, with its clean, sharp scent, and potent animal-derived fixatives like musk, sayang, from musk deer, or ambergris, yanjianhyang, a waxy substance from sperm whales. These last two were incredibly expensive and powerful, used in minute quantities to add depth and longevity to a blend, likely reserved for the wealthiest echelons of society. Besides sachets, you might also encounter solid perfumes. These could be made by blending powdered aromatic woods, resins, herbs, and spices with a binder like beeswax or fragrant oils. This pliable concoction could then be pressed into small, decorative containers or even molded into beads or ornaments. A tiny amount would be rubbed onto pulse points, like the wrists or behind the ears, releasing its scent slowly with the warmth of the skin. Floral waters or light infusions, created by steeping fresh petals or fragrant herbs in water or alcohol, could also be used. You might use such a fragrant water as a final rinse for your hair, or to lightly perfume your clothing before wearing it, ensuring you carried a delicate freshness with you. Then there was incense, or hyang. Its use in Korea is ancient, deeply intertwined with the introduction and practice of Buddhism, which uses incense extensively in rituals for purification and as an offering. But incense wasn't confined to temples. It was also burned in homes to create a pleasant and serene atmosphere, to welcome guests, or even for its perceived medicinal or spirit-calming properties. The art of appreciating and crafting incense was known as hyangdo, or the way of incense, a refined cultural practice much like the tea ceremony, where practitioners would learn to identify different types of incense and appreciate their subtle aromatic qualities. This is a well-established historical fact, highlighting the cultural significance of fragrance beyond mere personal adornment. The ingredients for incense often mirrored those used in hyangning: sandalwood, agarwood, various resins like frankincense or myrrh, if available through trade routes, and aromatic herbs. These would be finely ground and mixed with a binder, often mako powder, from the bark of the matchless thunbergy tree, or honey, then meticulously shaped into sticks, cones, or intricate patterns to be burned. The smoke from high-quality incense wouldn't be acrid or overwhelming, but a fragrant plume that would gently perfume the air and any textiles nearby. Storing your clothes in a chest where incense was frequently burned was another way to subtly imbue them with a pleasing scent. The Jiseong, those masters of allure we've met before, would have been particularly adept at using fragrances. A carefully chosen scent from a hyangnang, or the lingering aroma of fine incense in her quarters, would have been another layer to her captivating persona. For the nobility and royalty, access to the rarest ingredients meant their personal scents and the aromas that filled their palaces could be exceptionally luxurious. Imagine a royal procession, not just a feast for the eyes with all the vibrant silks and gleaming ornaments, but also a very delicately orchestrated cloud of expensive woody, floral, and musky notes. The original aromatherapy parade, perhaps? Commoners, too, had their ways of enjoying pleasant scents, though their ingredients would be simpler. A hyangnang might be filled with locally gathered dried lavender, mint, perilla leaves, or even fragrant wood shavings. dried citrus peels, like orange or yuzu, could also add a cheerful, fresh scent. The goal was the same: a subtle, clean fragrance that uplifted the spirits and made one's presence more agreeable. Now for a quirky tidbit. It was often believed that certain fragrances had protective or auspicious properties. Some scents were thought to ward off evil spirits or misfortune, while others might be used to attract good luck or enhance health. A hyangnang given as a gift, especially between lovers or close friends, could be imbued with deep personal meaning, the specific blend of aromatics chosen to convey a particular sentiment or wish. You might even have specific incense blends for different times of day, or for different emotional states you wish to cultivate. Unraveling the exact composition of some historical Korean fragrances, however, remains a fascinating challenge. Ethnobotanists and cultural historians are still working to identify the precise ingredients and proportions used in some historical Korean perfumes and incense blends. Recipes were often proprietary secrets, passed down orally within families or among specialist artisans, and some of the ancient aromatic plant species might no longer be common or easily identifiable today. It's like trying to reconstruct a lost art form, one nostril at a time. The overarching theme in the traditional Korean use of fragrance was subtlety. Your personal scent was a hidden charm, something to be discovered, not broadcast. Their idea of too much perfume was probably if someone could detect your sachet from clear across the courtyard, not from the other side of a modern-day department store. It was about creating an inviting, harmonious personal atmosphere, a fragrant fog that hinted at refinement and a deep appreciation for the gentle beauty offered by the natural world. Just imagine, as you drift off to sleep, the faint, calming scent of sandalwood and cloves, a gentle reminder of a world where even the air itself was an art form. We've just savored the subtle art of traditional Korean fragrances, imagining the delicate scents from hyangnang and burning incense that perfumed the lives of both men and women. Now, let's focus our attention specifically on the other half of the population. When we think about historical makeup and elaborate grooming, it's often women who first come to mind. But it would be a mistake to assume that medieval Korean men, particularly those of the refined yangban or scholar official class, were completely unconcerned with their appearance. While their practices were certainly more discreet and less colorful than women's, there were indeed masculine mirror moments, instances of careful grooming and even subtle cosmetic use that were considered part of being a cultivated gentleman. Forget any modern notions that equate male grooming with a lack of manliness. In Joseon Korea, especially, Confucian ideals heavily influenced societal norms. These ideals emphasized propriety, self-cultivation, and the importance of maintaining a dignified appearance that reflected one's inner character and social standing. A sloppy or unkempt appearance in a scholar or an official would have been seen as a sign of a disordered mind or a lack of self-respect. So, cleanliness, neatness, and an overall air of scholarly refinement were highly valued. Their morning routine might not have involved a 7-step K-beauty bonanza comparable to what some noblewomen practiced, but getting that songtu, top knot, perfectly centered and their hat positioned at just the right dignified angle, that definitely took time and skill. So, what did masculine grooming entail? First and foremost, cleanliness. Daily washing was important. Men, like women, would have used basic cleansers. Rice water, that ubiquitous skincare staple, was likely used by men as well for its gentle cleansing and softening properties. Simple plant-based powders, perhaps ground mung beans if the household could spare them, might have been used for a more thorough cleanse. For men who shaved, and while beards were common and often seen as a mark of maturity and dignity, some men, or men in certain professions, might have shaved parts of their face or maintained a very neat beard line. Soothing balms made from local herbs would have been essential to prevent irritation. When it came to their complexion, while they weren't striving for that extreme, pale moon whiteness that women were often pressured to achieve, a clear, healthy-looking skin tone was still desirable. It suggested good health and a lifestyle that wasn't overly rugged, unless, of course, you were a military man, where a more weathered look might be expected. Scholars spent a great deal of time indoors studying, and their ubiquitous gat provided excellent shade when they did venture out, so many naturally maintained a relatively fair complexion. Some historical accounts and literary descriptions subtly hint that men, particularly scholars or performers like Kwangdi, itinerant entertainers, might have occasionally used a very light, almost undetectable dusting of fine powder to even out their skin tone or reduce excessive shine, especially for public appearances or important meetings. If a scholar's face was a bit too shiny during a heated philosophical debate, did he lose points for lack of composure or simply excessive sebum productions? These are the vital questions we ponder. Eyebrows, too, received some attention. While men certainly weren't shaping and plucking their brows into delicate arches like women, ensuring their eyebrows were neat and not overly bushy or straggly was part of good grooming. A scholar known for his meticulous calligraphy would hardly present himself with chaotic eyebrows. If his brows were exceptionally sparse, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that a man might very discreetly use a tiny bit of soot, the same stuff used by women, to lightly fill them in, aiming for a naturally fuller look, not a painted one. Lip care was also a practical concern, especially in the dry Korean winters. Chapped, cracked lips would not have conveyed an image of refinement. So, men would have used simple balms, perhaps made from beeswax and a little camellia oil, or even just a touch of pine resin, to protect their lips. These would have been unscented or very lightly scented with something considered suitably masculine, like pine or a subtle herbal note. The goal was healthy, comfortable lips, not colored or glossy ones. Hair care was, of course, extremely important. As we discussed, the soothe or top knot was a significant symbol for married or adult men. Maintaining this hairstyle required care. Hair was kept long, washed regularly with traditional cleansers like water infused with iris roots and leaves, changpa, a practice particularly associated with the Dano festival but likely used at other times too for its cleansing and hair-strengthening properties. The soothe itself had to be tightly and neatly wound, and the manjin, the horsehair headband used to hold back the hair around the forehead and temples, was a crucial accessory. A well-made, properly fitted manjin was a mark of a gentleman. Beard grooming was another facet of male appearance. Beards were common, especially among older men and scholars, as they were seen as symbols of wisdom and authority. A full, well-kept beard was admired. This meant regular washing, combing, and possibly the light application of an oil, like camellia oil, to keep it neat and conditioned. You think your modern beard oil collection is fancy? They were probably using meticulously handcrafted camellia oil infused with locally sourced pine needles gathered under a specific phase of the moon, or, more realistically, just whatever good quality, subtly scented oil was available and deemed appropriate. Fragrance was also part of a refined gentleman's toilette, though again, subtlety was key. Men frequently carried hyangnang, scent pouches, just as women did. However, the scents chosen were typically different. While women might favor more floral or sweeter notes, men often preferred fragrances like sandalwood, agarwood, camphor, or other resinous and woody aromas that were considered more dignified and masculine. The scent would be a discreet personal aura, not an overpowering announcement. They also appreciated the use of incense in their studies or private rooms, creating a calming and intellectually stimulating atmosphere. The importance of a dignified and neat appearance for men, particularly the seonbai or scholar officials, is a well-documented historical fact rooted in Confucian philosophy. Proper attire, which included the correct hat and neatly maintained hair, was an outward manifestation of inner cultivation and adherence to societal order. There were even specific guidelines and expectations for appearance depending on one's official rank or social situation. For a quirky tidbit, consider the meticulous care that might have gone into maintaining the gat. These hats, often made of fine horsehair or silk, were delicate and expensive. Keeping them clean, perfectly shaped, and free from damage was essential. There were special hat boxes for storage, and a man might have a specific way of handling his gat to preserve its form. A damaged or misshapen gat could be seen as a sign of carelessness or even disrespect. Of course, the extent and nature of these grooming practices varied. A common farmer would have focused on basic cleanliness as his work and resources allowed, while a high-ranking scholar at court would have had more means and motivation to maintain a polished appearance. This leads to ongoing discussions among academics. Historians and gender studies scholars explore the nuances of Josian masculinity, debating how societal expectations for men's appearance balanced ideals of scholarly refinement with virtues like martial prowess or rugged simplicity, and the extent to which any cosmetic practices were openly acknowledged or remained strictly private, unspoken affairs. So, while the mirror moments for medieval Korean men might have been less about overt beautification and more about achieving an air of dignified composure and scholarly refinement, they were an integral part of their lives. It was a quiet, often unseen dedication to presenting oneself in a manner that befitted one's station and the esteemed values of their society. It's a reminder that attention to personal appearance in its many forms is a deeply human concern, transcending gender and time. We've explored the discreet grooming habits of medieval Korean men, understanding that even for them, appearance held significance. Now, let's venture beyond the realms of everyday beauty, status displays, and personal allure into a domain where makeup and adornment took on deeper, more spiritual meanings. We're talking about sacred strokes and spirit shields, the role of cosmetic practices in significant ceremonies, and the potent, protective rites of Korean shamanism. Here, pigments weren't just for beautification. They were imbued with power, symbolism, and the ability to mediate between the human and spirit worlds. One of the most visually striking examples of ceremonial makeup is traditional Korean bridal makeup. If you've ever seen pictures of a Korean bride in full traditional attire, you'll have noticed the iconic red dots, one on each cheek and sometimes one on the forehead. These are called yeonji and ganji. This isn't just a cute decorative touch, it's steeped in symbolism. The bride's face would typically be made very white with powder, her eyebrows carefully defined, and her lips a distinct red. The yeonji ganji themselves, those vibrant crimson circles, were believed to serve multiple purposes. Most commonly, they were seen as a powerful charm to ward off evil spirits and misfortune, protecting the bride as she embarked on her new life. Red, as we'll see, is a potent color in many protective rituals. The dots were also sometimes said to symbolize purity or virginity, and to be an auspicious omen for a happy and fertile marriage. Your modern wedding day stress might involve getting your hair just right, but imagine also ensuring your cheek dots were perfectly aligned to guarantee dynastic prosperity and deflect any stray malevolent spirits. That's some next-level bridal preparation. While the bride's makeup was quite specific, the groom's was simpler, focusing on neatness and a dignified presentation, appropriate for the solemnity and joy of the occasion. For other significant life events or court ceremonies, specific colors or symbolic adornments might have been used, often drawing from the rich symbolism of the obangsek, the 5 traditional Korean colors: white, black, blue/green, yellow, and red. Each color corresponds to a direction, an element, and various other aspects of life and the cosmos, and their careful use in ceremonial dress and, by extension, sometimes in adornment, would have reinforced the ritual's meaning and power. Now, let's step into the vibrant, energetic world of Korean shamanism, or musak. Here, makeup and costume are not just incidental, they are absolutely crucial to the shamans, the mudangs, ability to connect with the spirit world. During a gut, a shamanistic ritual often involving hours of chanting, dancing, and music, the mudang acts as an intermediary between humans and the gods or ancestral spirits. To do this, they often transform their appearance dramatically. Their costumes are brightly colored and elaborate, but it's their facial adornment that can be particularly striking. Some mudang paint their faces with bold, symbolic patterns and colors. These aren't random designs. Each color and motif can represent specific deities or spirits the shaman is invoking, or they can serve as protective markings, shielding the shaman from any negative energies encountered during their spiritual journeying. You might see faces painted stark white with dramatic black and red accents around the eyes and mouth, transforming the human countenance into something otherworldly. If you thought getting your winged eyeliner perfectly symmetrical was a challenge, imagine a shaman trying to accurately paint on the symbolic face of a powerful, and perhaps rather impatient, mountain god. No pressure there, I'm sure. The colors used by shamans are deeply symbolic. Red, as mentioned, is widely considered a protective color, potent against evil spirits and bad luck. You'll see it frequently in their costumes and sometimes in their face paint. White can signify purity or represent a celestial deity. Black might relate to the underworld or ancestors. Yellow could represent the earth or central power, and blue or green the east or spirits of nature. The specific combinations and patterns would be part of the shaman's sacred knowledge, often passed down through generations or revealed through spiritual experience. Beyond the elaborate makeup of the mudong themselves, certain cosmetic principles or ingredients could find their way into broader folk protective practices. The belief in red as a powerful apotropaic, evil-warding color is ancient and widespread. This links back to the bride's yanji-ganji, but you might also find instances where red pigment, perhaps from ochre or specific plants, was used to draw protective symbols on a child's forehead to guard against illness, or on the lintel of a house to keep out misfortune. While not strictly makeup in the daily sense, these practices share the idea of applying pigment to a surface, be it skin or a dwelling, for a specific, often supernatural, purpose. Certain ingredients that sometimes found their way into cosmetic preparations might also have been valued for their perceived spiritual properties. For example, some minerals or earths, beyond just providing color, might have been believed to carry particular energies. Soot, providing black pigment, could be used in rituals not just for its color but for its association with fire, purification, or specific chthonic deities. Specific plant extracts might be chosen for inclusion in a ritual preparation as much for their symbolic meaning or traditional spiritual associations as for their scent or color. It's a well-documented historical fact that the practice of yanji-ganji for brides has a long and rich tradition in Korea, with its symbolism widely understood. Similarly, the distinctive costumes and, for some traditions, painted faces or masks of Korean shamans during gut rituals are a vibrant and enduring part of Korean folk religion and cultural heritage. These visual transformations are essential to the efficacy and meaning of the rituals themselves. The study of these sacred and protective markings is a deep and fascinating field. Folklorists and scholars of religion continue to analyze the complex semiotics of color and pattern in Korean shamanistic ritual makeup, debating the precise origins and evolving meanings of these symbols. There's ongoing discussion about their connections to older Siberian or Northeast Asian shamanistic traditions, tracing the threads of ancient beliefs that have woven their way into these powerful visual expressions of faith and cultural identity. So, as you can see, in medieval Korea, the act of applying color and pattern to the skin could transcend vanity or social signaling. It could be a prayer, a shield, a conduit to the divine. These sacred strokes connected individuals to their community, their ancestors, and the vast, unseen world of spirits, ensuring protection, bestowing blessings, and marking life's most significant transitions with a touch of sacred, colorful artistry. We've seen how makeup and adornment in medieval Korea could transform one's appearance for sacred ceremonies and serve as potent spiritual shields. But all this knowledge, the recipes for skin-softening lotions, the techniques for achieving perfectly arched eyebrows, the secrets to a subtly alluring perfume, the methods for crafting protective markings, how was it all preserved and passed down through the generations? These weren't just casual tips. This was valuable cultural capital, often representing family traditions or crucial professional skills, especially for jisseeing or court attendance. The transmission of this precious beauty wisdom was a meticulous process, relying on both whispered words and, occasionally, the permanence of written scrolls. The primary method, especially for everyday beauty practices among the general populace, was undoubtedly oral tradition. Imagine a young girl in a Joseon household, watching her mother or grandmother prepare a face wash from ground mung beans or collect rice water after preparing a meal. She wouldn't be handed a written instruction manual. Instead, she'd learn by observing, by listening, by doing. Her mother might explain, "You must grind the beans this fine, my daughter, and mix the water to this consistency for the best results." Or, "Always pat the rice water gently onto your skin, never rub." These were the whispered wisdoms, shared in the quiet intimacy of the home, passed from one generation of women to the next. This was how family recipes for skin soothers, herbal hair rinses, or simple blemish treatments were kept alive. Their version of a secret family recipe probably wasn't for kimchi or cookies, but for a face mask that could make you look 10 years younger, or at least convince your notoriously critical mother-in-law that you were a diligent and refined housekeeper. Within broader female communities, too, knowledge would be shared. Friends, sisters, aunts, and neighbors might exchange tips and tricks, discussing what worked best for certain skin concerns or how to achieve a particularly fashionable eyebrow shape. A woman who had a knack for creating a lovely, subtle lip stain from local berries might share her method with a close friend. This informal network was crucial for disseminating practical beauty lore, adapting it to local resources and evolving tastes. In more formal settings, like the gyobang where jisseong were trained, or within the hierarchy of court ladies in the palace, the transmission of knowledge was more structured, akin to an apprenticeship. A senior jisseong, renowned for her beauty and artistry, would painstakingly teach her protégés the secrets of her craft, not just recipes, but sophisticated application techniques, an understanding of how makeup appeared in different lighting, and how to maintain a flawless appearance for hours. Similarly, experienced court ladies would instruct their juniors in the specific and often very rigid protocols of royal grooming and adornment. This involved not just skill but also discretion and an understanding of the nuanced social codes of the court. While oral tradition was dominant, written records also played a part, especially among the literate upper classes. Some noblewomen, who had the privilege of education, might have kept personal journals or notebooks where they jotted down cosmetic recipes they found effective, observations on different ingredients, or even sketches of fashionable hairstyles. These personal compendiums would have been treasured possessions, perhaps passed down within the family. Then you have more formal texts. A cornerstone example of such written transmission is the Gyuhap Chongseo, the Encyclopedia of Women's Life, compiled by the noblewoman Lee Bingyeogak in 1809. This remarkable work, intended as a guide for women managing elite households, contains extensive sections on various aspects of women's lives, including incredibly detailed advice on skincare, the preparation of cosmetics like face powders and rouge, *Yanji*, perfumery, and hair care. It lists specific ingredients, gives instructions for their preparation, and explains their benefits. The very existence of the Gyuhap Chongseo is a powerful historical fact, demonstrating that this knowledge was considered important enough to be systematically recorded and preserved for future generations of women in her social sphere. Medical texts also contributed to the pool of beauty-related knowledge. The famous Dongre Bagam, Principles and Practice of Eastern Medicine, compiled by the royal physician Hyo Jun and published in 1613, is a comprehensive medical encyclopedia that includes descriptions of various skin conditions and recommends ingredients, often herbs and other natural substances, for treating them and improving the complexion. While not a beauty manual per se, the information within it would have undoubtedly informed cosmetic practices, as the line between health and beauty was often beautifully blurred. Clear, healthy skin was beautiful skin. Literary works, too, could indirectly preserve and transmit beauty ideals. Poems might praise a woman's jade-like skin or willow leaf brows, reinforcing those aesthetic standards. Stories and essays might describe the appearance of characters in detail, giving glimpses into contemporary grooming habits or the symbolic meaning of certain adornments. Of course, passing down these secrets wasn't without its challenges. Oral tradition, while intimate and adaptable, always carries the risk of details being forgotten, misunderstood, or embellished over time. Imagine trying to follow a skincare tutorial that's been passed down by word of mouth for 3 generations. Okay, so Great Aunt Moonbeam said to use a pinch of sun-dried nightingale tongues, or was it phoenix feathers? And was that before or after you danced widdershins around the persimmon tree? It could get complicated. Literacy, especially among women and commoners, was not widespread for much of Korean history, so written texts were accessible only to a privileged few. And even when knowledge was written down, some of the most valuable or secret techniques, particularly those used by professionals like jiseing or royal perfumers, might have been deliberately kept from wide circulation to maintain a competitive edge or an air of exclusivity. This brings us to a quirky thought. Were there ever coded recipes or deliberately obtuse instructions to protect a particularly valuable beauty secret? Perhaps a jiseing's personal notebook might contain a recipe for an enchanting perfume, but with one key ingredient anachronistically referred to as dragon's breath or tears of the moon, decipherable only to her chosen apprentice. Or maybe a tradition existed where a family's most potent skin-rejuvenating formula was only revealed to the eldest daughter on her wedding day, whispered as a sacred trust. Forget YouTube tutorials, they had sit patiently by your grandmother for several hours while she demonstrates the precise lunar phase and incantation required for harvesting the most potent ginseng. More patience was definitely part of the learning curve. The process of learning was meticulous. It involved careful observation, endless repetition, and a deep understanding of natural ingredients, how to identify them, when and how to harvest them, the best ways to process and store them. Whether it was grinding mung beans to the perfect fineness or blending fragrant woods for an incense offering, precision and care were paramount, even if measurements weren't always standardized in the modern sense. The act of teaching and learning this wisdom often formed a strong bond between mentor and student, mother and daughter, creating a shared legacy of female knowledge and skill. Historians specializing in women's history and literacy in pre-modern Korea continue to explore these dynamics. There's an ongoing scholarly debate, for example, regarding the extent to which informal, orally transmitted beauty knowledge among common women may have influenced or diverged from the more codified practices recorded in texts primarily accessible to the elite. Did common women develop entirely separate traditions, or were there trickles of information moving between social strata? Ultimately, the survival of these medieval Korean makeup secrets, from the simplest herbal rinse to the most complex courtly cosmetic, depended on this chain of transmission, a delicate thread of whispered words, careful demonstrations, and occasionally, the enduring power of the written word, all working to ensure that the art of enhancing beauty, in all its diverse forms, would continue to flourish. We've delved into the meticulous ways medieval Korean beauty secrets were preserved and passed down, through whispered family wisdom and occasionally, carefully penned scrolls. But Korean culture, including its beauty practices, didn't exist in a vacuum. The Korean peninsula has long been a crossroads of sorts, participating in a vibrant exchange of goods, ideas, and cultural influences with its neighbors. So, now let's explore how imported hues from distant lands and the allure of exotic blooms found their way into the Korean cosmetic palette, subtly shaping and enriching indigenous traditions. It's important to understand that this wasn't about Korean beauty standards being completely supplanted by foreign ones. Far from it. Korean aesthetics, with their emphasis on naturalness, pale skin, and graceful simplicity, remained deeply ingrained. However, like any dynamic culture, there was an openness, particularly among the elite and those with access to trade goods, to incorporate novel ingredients or even be inspired by certain trends from afar. China, as Korea's large and influential neighbor, naturally played a significant role in this exchange. Throughout the Goryeo and Joseon dynasties, there were extensive diplomatic, cultural, and economic ties. The Tang dynasty in China, 618 to 907 AD, renowned for its cosmopolitanism and highly developed arts, including elaborate makeup styles, overlapped with Korea's Silla period and the beginning of Goryeo. It's plausible that certain Tang fashions, perhaps specific eyebrow shapes that were popular in the Tang court, or the use of particular pigments like vibrant reds or even blues in decorative makeup for performers, might have inspired trends among the Korean aristocracy. Later Chinese dynasties like the Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing continued to be sources of luxury goods, some of which would have included raw materials for cosmetics or finished items. Imagine the excitement in courtly circles when a diplomatic envoy returned from China bearing gifts of rare silks, precious jades, and perhaps small, exquisite boxes containing exotic scented powders or vibrant pigments previously unseen in Korea. What kind of exotic blooms and hues are we talking about? For pigments, while many, like the crucial safflower for red, were cultivated locally, some rarer or more intense colors might have been imported. Cinnabar, for instance, which produces a brilliant vermilion red, though it's a toxic mercury sulfide, so its use would have been fraught with peril as we've discussed, was a mineral pigment known in China and could have been traded. Indigo, for deep blues or blacks used in dyes and possibly some ceremonial markings, was another trade item. Specific mineral powders, perhaps with a unique shimmer or hue, could also have arrived via these networks. Aromatic substances for perfumes and incense were major trade commodities throughout Asia. Remember those precious ingredients like cloves, zhonghyang, sandalwood, danhyang, and especially the highly coveted agarwood, chimyang? While some varieties of sandalwood might have been found closer to home, the finest quality agarwood, along with spices like cloves, often originated in Southeast Asia or India and would have reached Korea through complex overland and maritime trade routes. Resins like frankincense and myrrh, famed in Western antiquity and the Middle East, also traveled eastwards, finding their way into incense blends in Buddhist temples and noble homes. Musk and ambergris, those potent animal-derived fixatives, were classic high-value trade goods, essential for creating sophisticated, long-lasting perfumes. Trying to get your hands on a fresh shipment of Sumatran agarwood or Sri Lankan cloves was probably the ancient equivalent of queuing for the latest limited edition tech gadget. You needed good connections or a very persuasive merchant friend. Even medicinal herbs with skincare benefits could be part of this exchange. Chinese pharmacopoeias were extensive, and if a particular exotic herb gained a reputation for clearing the skin or promoting a youthful complexion, it might be sought after by Korean physicians and, subsequently, by those looking to enhance their beauty. Powdered pearl, used in some traditions for its skin lightening and brightening properties, would also largely depend on imported pearls, either from China or Southeast Asia. These goods arrived through various channels. Official diplomatic missions between Korea and China were frequent, and the exchange of gifts was a standard part of protocol. These gifts often included bolts of silk, precious metals, ginseng, a key Korean export, and also luxury items like rare incense ingredients or beautifully crafted cosmetic containers. Merchant caravans plying the overland routes and ships sailing the coastal waters also played a vital role, even if they didn't always bring goods directly into every Korean port. Key trading posts and border towns would have been bustling centers of exchange. You can almost picture a marketplace scene, Korean merchants haggling with traders from across the Yellow Sea, examining bolts of patterned silk, sniffing curiously at unfamiliar spices, and perhaps marveling at a small vial of intensely colored pigment from a distant land. It's easy to imagine the unboxing videos back then. Greetings, esteemed viewers. My husband just returned from the capital, and look at this exquisite pot of face powder he acquired from a merchant newly arrived from Chuanzhou. The shimmer is simply divine. It's crucial to emphasize the element of adaptation. When foreign ingredients or styles did arrive in Korea, they were rarely adopted wholesale. Instead, They were often integrated into existing Korean practices and adapted to suit local tastes and aesthetic preferences. A bold Tang Dynasty eyebrow style might be softened and made more delicate to align with Korean ideals of subtle beauty. An imported pigment might be mixed with locally sourced binders or extenders. A new aromatic resin might be incorporated into a traditional incense blend, adding a novel note to a familiar fragrance. This process of selective adoption and creative adaptation is a hallmark of Korean cultural dynamism. Archaeological findings provide concrete evidence of these ancient trade connections. Silla tombs, for example, have yielded artifacts like Roman glass beads and Central Asian jewelry, demonstrating Korea's links, however indirect, to far-reaching networks. Records from diplomatic envoys often list the types of goods exchanged, giving us clues about what luxury items, including potential cosmetic ingredients, were moving between courts. When your neighbor, Lady Kim, suddenly started sporting a new, rather exotic eyebrow shape that was clearly inspired by the latest trends from the Tang capital of Chang'an, well, that was the ancient equivalent of seeing someone meticulously copy your carefully curated Pinterest board. This interaction also fosters academic inquiry. Art historians and archaeologists continue to debate the precise routes and extent of cosmetic ingredient trade in ancient Northeast Asia, particularly for rare items like specific aromatic resins or mineral pigments. They explore how much these imports directly shaped local Korean cosmetic practices versus merely supplementing them with a touch of the exotic. Pinpointing the origin of a trace mineral in a 1,000-year-old cosmetic pot is no easy feat. So, while the heart of medieval Korean beauty remained true to its indigenous roots and locally sourced bounty, these imported hues and exotic blooms added fascinating layers of complexity and sophistication, especially for those who could access them. They were whispers from distant lands, tangible evidence of Korea's connection to a wider world, subtly enriching the fragrant fogs and painted charms of its unique beauty culture. We've journeyed through the fragrant world of medieval Korean perfumery and explored how even subtle hints of imported ingredients could add an exotic touch to local beauty practices. Now, as our historical exploration draws towards its gentle close, it's time to bring these ancient secrets into the light of our modern world. You might be surprised to discover just how many of these centuries-old practices and philosophies are not merely quaint historical footnotes, but actually resonate with, and in some cases directly prefigure, the principles behind the global phenomenon that is contemporary K-beauty. It seems the quest for that radiant glow has some very deep, very Korean roots. Think about the absolute cornerstone of K-beauty today, the almost religious devotion to skincare. The multi-step routines, the focus on achieving flawless, luminous, glass skin, or dewy skin. Where do you think that emphasis comes from? It's a direct echo of the medieval Korean obsession with cultivating a perfect complexion as the true foundation of all beauty. Remember that pale, jade-like skin we talked about in our very first section? While the ideal of extreme paleness has evolved, the core idea that impeccable skin is paramount, rather than relying on heavy makeup to cover imperfections, is a tradition that has flowed uninterrupted through the centuries. Those medieval ladies with their meticulous routines involving rice water, mung bean cleansers, and herbal infusions were, in essence, the original skincare gurus. If they'd had access to social media, their shelfies featuring earthenware pots and mysterious dried herbs would have been truly epic, no doubt. And what about the ingredients? So many of the natural components that were staples in the medieval Korean beauty pantry are now star ingredients in modern K-beauty formulations. Ginseng, revered for its revitalizing properties back then, is now a hero ingredient in countless anti-aging serums and creams. Mugwort, once used in traditional baths and for soothing skin, is celebrated in contemporary calming masks and essences. Rice water and rice bran extracts continue to be popular for their brightening and softening effects. Mung beans, honey, camellia oil, various floral extracts like chrysanthemum or lotus, the list goes on. It's a historical fact that many contemporary South Korean beauty brands explicitly market their use of traditional Korean herbal ingredients, often referred to as hanbang cosmetics, and frequently cite ancient texts like the Donghae Bagum or practices from the Gyuhap Chongseo as their inspiration. It turns out glass skin wasn't just invented by a marketing team in Seoul last year. It was probably a Goryeo queen who just really loved her rice bran facials and ginseng concoctions. The methods, too, show surprising parallels. Gentle exfoliation, a key principle in K-beauty to avoid irritating the skin, was practiced in medieval times with finely ground mung beans or soft rice bran. The intense focus on hydration in modern routines, with layering of essences, serums, and ampoules, echoes the ancient use of moisturizing honey masks, natural oils, and hydrating plant infusions to keep the skin plump and dewy. Even specific makeup techniques have an ancient lineage. That K-beauty gradient lip, with its concentration of color on the inner lips fading outwards, we saw how that was a popular way to apply lip color hundreds of years ago, aiming for a just-bitten or naturally blooming look. The meticulous attention to eyebrow aesthetics, while the preferred shapes may evolve, from the willow leaf brows of Goryeo to the straighter, fuller brows popular today, the dedication to achieving neat, well-defined brows that frame the face beautifully remains a constant. Of course, there are differences. The modern pursuit of healthy radiance is a more inclusive ideal than the sometimes dangerously pursued extreme paleness of the past, though a preference for fairer skin tones does persist in many parts of Asia. And today, we have the marvels of dermatological science, advanced extraction techniques, sophisticated preservatives, and mass production, which allow these traditional ingredients to be delivered in highly effective, stable, and accessible formulations. You're unlikely to find lead or mercury in your K-beauty serum, thankfully. A quirky, though perhaps tenuous, parallel can be seen in some modern trends. Consider the recent K-beauty trend of slugging, applying a thin layer of an occlusive petroleum-based product as the last step of an evening skincare routine to lock in moisture. While petroleum jelly wasn't available in medieval Korea, the underlying principle of using a rich, occlusive layer, like a thick beeswax and oil balm, or even animal fats in some colder, harsher climates historically, to protect the skin and prevent moisture loss overnight isn't entirely dissimilar. It's that ancient wisdom of barrier protection in a modern, albeit very different, guise. The enduring appeal of these ancient echoes in modern K-beauty is a fascinating subject. Cultural critics and marketing analysts debate whether the global success of K-beauty is primarily due to its innovative formulations and savvy marketing, or if its emphasis on ancient Korean wisdom and natural ingredients provides a unique selling proposition that resonates deeply with contemporary consumer desires for authenticity, wellness, and a connection to tradition. Perhaps it's a bit of both. There's a certain romance and trustworthiness associated with ingredients and practices that have stood the test of centuries. When your great-great-great-great Joseon dynasty ancestor advised patting your face 100 times with ginseng-infused water, she wasn't just being endearingly eccentric, she was, in a way, anticipating the rise of potent essences and the importance of gentle application techniques. These ancient echoes remind us that while trends may come and go, the fundamental desire to care for our skin, to enhance our natural features, and to feel good about ourselves is timeless. The medieval Korean women, with their patient grinding of beans, their careful collection of floral waters, and their secret recipes for scented powders, were part of a long, unbroken lineage of individuals seeking beauty and wellness through the resources available to them. Their legacy, surprisingly vibrant and relevant, continues to glow in the heart of K-beauty today, a testament to the enduring power of nature, tradition, and a little bit of well-applied wisdom. And now, as our journey through these medieval Korean makeup secrets comes to a soft landing, let's just take a moment to let all that fascinating history settle in. Think of the quiet dedication, the ingenious use of nature's pantry, the subtle artistry that went into creating beauty in a world so different from our own. From the pursuit of that luminous, moon-like complexion to the intricate language of hairpins and the hidden allure of scented sachets, it was a world where appearance was deeply intertwined with identity, status, and even spirituality. The echoes of those ancient practices, surprisingly, still touch our modern lives, particularly in the beloved rituals of K-beauty, reminding us that the desire to feel beautiful and to care for oneself is a timeless human thread. So, as you begin to drift off, perhaps you can imagine the soft rustle of silk, the faint scent of sandalwood and plum blossom in the cool night air, the gentle glow of a paper lantern casting a warm light on a face serene and carefully adorned. Let these images soothe you. Let the ingenuity and resilience of those who came before us inspire a sense of wonder. The secrets are no longer quite so hidden, but the appreciation for the beauty they cultivated can still linger, a soft whisper from the past as you ease into your dreams. May your rest be peaceful, and your dreams be filled with the gentle glow of history.